making a video on police stops, and I'm going to go into the interpretation of how the law works at those points, because there's a lot going on that isn't right, and people seem to be making some mistakes, that I think anyway. So I'm going to put up a video, but I'm going to do this one first as part one. This is a really good example, and it introduces a few concepts, particularly in relation to licenses and what you have to do in a license situation and when there is no license situation. Now, this was Eve Black. All right, so this is part one. Part two I'll upload in the next couple of days.
Who posted a video of herself breaching a Melbourne checkpoint. Here's a reminder of what she did.
I don't need to answer your questions. No. Have I committed a crime? Have I committed a crime? Have I committed a crime? Thank you.
This is Eve Black, I think in 2021, maybe late 2020, at a checkpoint in Victoria, and it's a Victoria police officer. Can make out the emblem, and news reports later confirmed it was a police officer. And that exchange went 100% in accordance with how law is provisioned in Australia. The health portfolio in any government in Australia is a civil and administrative function, absent of criminality, therefore requires either the implied or express consent of an individual to engage with the government on a potential contract. Now, the terms and conditions in this potential contract put out by the Andrews government, I believe, was that you could only travel a certain distance, and they were checking to see your address to make sure you didn't travel that. If that's incorrect, let me know. I'm going by memory, this was a while ago. So when Eve said, "I don't need to answer your questions," the officer took that as clearly she was not in agreement with the terms and conditions, and therefore there was no chance of a potential contract. Being that if Eve had gone further than what the Andrews government thought she would, that she would have to stop and go back and be issued a financial contract between her and the Victorian government called a penalty notice. Now, most people, through ignorance, would answer the question, go along with it, but Eve chose not to, and the officer, to their credit, did the right thing. I will pull Eve up on something, although she did get away with it. When she said, "I don't need to answer your questions," that's just stating that that's the situation, and the police officer could still just keep asking. We don't need to, but you might anyway. The correct thing to do is to make a statement and say, "I am not answering any of your questions," because that clearly then establishes your position or where you stand.
Yeah, well, they caught up with her yesterday. She's now been arrested. And for more, we're joined by legal expert Justin Quill in Melbourne.
Now, that video was widespread, and they had to go into damage control, the police, the government and the media, because they didn't want the wider public to realise that the whole thing was just bluff and bluster without any legal teeth at all. As far as enforcement goes, I mean, they could get your consent and trick you into it, but if you did what Eve did, there's nothing they could do, and they didn't want people starting to investigate and go down rabbit holes and find all that out. So they had to nip it in the bud.
Justin, thanks for your time this morning. I mean, first up, though, you are in lockdown. I assume you're doing the right thing. How do you feel about this woman's actions?
So we assume that this Justin guy's got a law degree. That doesn't mean he's a practicing solicitor, though, because it might not have been admitted to the bar. You can still pass the course. But anyway, he's their expert. And look at him. Look at these Hollywood-type guys they wheel out. He's got the jacket on with the shirt, no tie. Watch him now. He's the only guy they could find at short notice. There was something with that transition that wasn't exactly smooth, because anyway, I'm not going to break that down.
Look, it's frustrating, I guess, and you know, given that I'm on a live television show, I'll be careful with my language.
Right, he's a legal expert. He hasn't got onto the legal part yet because it gets a bit tricky for them. So he's just gone into the emotional side. There's two parts, emotion and then the law, and he decided, even though he's a lawyer, we think, maybe. He's gone onto the emotional side and he's scolding her. She's naughty. And look at the caption at the bottom. COVID skeptic arrested. Victorian police smashed through car window to arrest Eve Black. So that's what happens to you people.
Everyone's trying to do the right thing. I've got my mask here. We've got an exemption where it's important for people to be able to hear us, so that's why I have the mask off.
Was that an actual exemption so you could be heard? Oh, just taking it off, officer, because I need to be heard at short notice, so I never ever fucking wear one. This guy would never have worn a mask. He's worse than the pollies. At least sometimes the pollies might put it on when the cameras are on, or they take them off straight away because, you know, they don't want to be subject to the bullshit being dumped on the masses. They're above all that, and that's what this guy thinks as well. So he's not putting on that mask, not even for show.
For the moment, while I'm doing this cross, but as soon as I've finished it, I'll be putting it back on.
Oh, I take it all back. Look at that face. He specifically said he's going to put it on straight away. Did the right thing. Oh, I feel bad now.
And if everyone does the right thing, we will get on top of it. But
you won't observe me doing the right thing.
Yesterday, police caught up with her. They smashed her window when she again refused to provide any details. Plenty of people this morning saying good on them.
That was a very sneaky line the scriptwriters included in there. Plenty of people would not condone smashing a window. Some of them who don't know the law might go, well, you can pull her over, I guess, but you're smashing a window. I might not say good on you to that. That was very subtle and sneaky.
What's she being charged with?
Now, police turned up at press conferences, were interviewed. Mick Fuller, you couldn't get him out of the first couple of months of COVID. Couldn't escape him from your TV screens. Why aren't they interviewing the police? Why have they got this Hollywood leading man-looking friggin' supposed lawyer fronting up? How does he know? How do we know that he's got accurate information? How do we know that he's going to translate it? Well, why have a middle person? Just get the police there. Because this is a fucking stitch-up load of bullshit.
Yeah, and look, it's important to note that what happened yesterday is obviously a very separate incident to the one that we saw the video of.
Well, it's correct that it's legally separate, but it's not police operationally separate. Because, like I mentioned at the start, this was damage control.
She's been released. The summons is in the mail. It's driving offences. It's failure to produce a licence with identifying details.
Now, at the time, the police obviously began tracking her and hunting her down. They were always going to pull her over. Now, what she did was wrong this time, because if she's saying, I'm not going to give if she's carrying on like she did at this checkpoint when they pulled her over for a traffic offence, well, the main difference is that she's got a licence. She's already consented to all the road rules. So the police then have grounds to enforce that contract that you've already entered into. So what they did was they obviously tracked her, which is so easy to do with all the cameras all over the place, and they even have access to her. If they know your phone number, they go to the telcos now under all these surveillance laws that they brought in, and they'll just track in the vicinity where you are. And they're following a target. They can pull them over for any reason. Just, you indicated too late, or you slammed on your brakes driving negligently. They'll just pull you over, make something up. So that's what they've done with her. I'm not sure if there was any... I didn't see a video released of that. Maybe there was and I just missed it.
And also failure to comply with the directives of the Chief Medical Officer.
And remember, he was careful to say for legal purposes they were two separate incidences. So what he's talking about now is separate from all of the road rules, court attendance notices. And I dare say most likely, given that they tried to keep all of these things out of the court by cancelling all the fines, particularly in New South Wales and in other states, she probably just got a penalty notice that she may or may not have paid and got refunded.
We've been talking about these two teenagers in Queensland and whether or not the punishment fits the crime.
And they wanted to introduce the word crime because Eve said, have I committed a crime? And officer obviously indicated no, but they're trying to make out like it was a crime, but it wasn't. So what they do is she mentions this other Queensland thing going on, and when she uses the word crime, she doesn't say they've committed a crime. She uses it colloquially, like, does the punishment fit the crime? In which case they could just argue I was just speaking colloquially, not stating that it was a crime. So they've got two degrees of separation there. One, it's a separate case, and one is colloquial, but they've managed to use the word crime in this story about Eve.
In regards to what Eve Black has done here, what can she be charged with? What can she be fined, and what is the potential punishment?
So Ellie's walked out back and stuttering, and that got to say, okay, well, it's just a fine, obviously not a crime.
This is very different to normal circumstances where someone walking down the street, the police can't just stop you and ask you for identification unless they think you have committed a crime or about to commit a crime.
And they need to have evidence of probable cause, i.e., above 50% chance on a balance of probability for them to even engage with you, but they can.
But we are in a state of emergency at the moment. That's been officially declared.
Does not change a thing. It's still a health portfolio matter. It's still civil and administrative. And there is no crime, which even in this bullshit story, they're careful to use the word crime but separate it. I'm going to go into it deeper in part 2. I'll just summarise and reiterate that civil and administrative operates off consent to contract. Under a licensing regime, they get your consent in advance, and that consent remains for the period the licence is active. Outside of licensing, consent is determined at point of contact. They cannot force consent, or otherwise it's not consent. And the word emergency does not change that.
And in Victoria, for example, there's a particular act, the Health and Wellbeing Act, and that sets out all the provisions that apply when we're under a state of emergency. And so where you don't follow the directives of the Chief Medical Officer, Brett Sutton in the case of Victoria, and his delegate, so Victoria Police, then you can be fined some pretty serious fines.
I'm sure if a person voluntarily gives their name and the police enter it onto a contract, then sure, they've entered the contract and they can be fined. But if you don't state your name for the purposes of the contract, well, a lot of people who come to my channel know what that means.
At the moment, if I was to walk down the street without a mask, I would be up for 10 penalty units. That's about $1,652.
Right, firstly, if a cop approached him, he'd have some kind of way of letting him know that he's connected and just, look, please go away. Yeah, you know what to do now. And secondly, 1,600. Is that how much it is for a mask fine?
But you can be fined up to 120 penalty units, so it's nearly $20,000 if you continue to flout those laws.
Yeah, which laws? Is he still talking about the mask, or is he drifted on to something else? Because 20,000, that's a pretty big hit. But look, at this time, it wasn't designed to scare the people into submission.
So the fines can get pretty serious. 1,652 might not seem like a lot if you don't follow those directives.
Well, I think he's speaking for himself. I don't think he's speaking for anyone out in Western Sydney. $1,650, Jesus fucking Christ. Doing something that he claims, oh yeah, if you need to be heard, you just take it off.
Not wearing a mask is $200.
What? I said 20 seconds ago. He specifically said the mask was $1,620, I think he said. Now he's saying it's down to 200. It's just the old trick of just saying two contrary statements and then at any point in time, like, oh, I actually meant that one. Oh, so you're off the hook for the other one, even though you got to say it.
Well, hopefully it sends a strong message to these COVID skeptics to do the right thing and do it for all of us. Thanks for joining us this morning, Justin.
Well, there's Ellie wrapping it up. You know, she got rewarded for her COVID stint of lies, those couple of years of sitting alongside Stefanovic bullshitting her arse off, well, reading the script that she knew was untrue. So, yeah, she was bullshitting her arse off. And she got the current affair gig. Quite a promotion now that they've put Tracy out to pasture, who, by the way, also did 2 or 3 years of bullshitting her arse off. You know, it would have been a nice finish for the mask to be seen on Justin's face, for Andy to go, okay, well, we'll finish it up, so if you want to put your mask back on and, you know, show us you did the right thing. They probably even put that to this guy. I don't know how well connected he is. He could be, you know, way above Ali and some of the, you know, Channel 9 producers, and he's just said, fuck off. And they've got, okay, sir. I don't know who the hell he is. But does he look like he's about to put a mask on? All right, that's it for this one. Like I said, in part 2's coming up, and that's where I go into a lot more detail, and I introduce the comprehend versus understand thing as well when you're talking to cops. All right, that's it for this one.